Welcome back to Joe's Astrology. Looking at this book still, we're looking at Pluto. Pluto in the 11th. And this book, depending on which one it is, like the Pluto in Leo, there wasn't really that much to be said, but the Pluto in Aquarius has maybe triple the information. So he says here, Pluto in the 11th is learning to break free from all conditionings experienced in the early years. There are three strategies for responding to this intent. Some have been leaving behind the conditionings from this and past lifetimes. They reject anything that tries to define them or tell them who to be or how to act. They have been pulling away from the mainstream society. Now, I've only known personally a couple or a handful of Pluto in the 11th, and one of them was an artist. And growing up, I would say he was definitely breaking free from his conditioning. And was a thinker. He would think for himself. But then later on, as he got older, I think he still has that in him, but he's not, he's more middle of the road. I wouldn't say he's pulled away completely from mainstream society. They have been gaining objectivity by learning to view themselves outside of the confines of time and space. They feel disconnected from identification with nation or culture. They're learning to sever the attachments that limit growth or new ways of discovering themselves. I have seen that in another person I know. They're learning how to identify the inner pieces that are no longer of value to them. Through this, they come to see how each piece influences each other piece and thus influences the whole structure. They observe self to see why they are as they are and to eliminate that which holds back further growth. Because of their need to explore new approaches, they are quite innovative. Their innovation can be perceived as threatening by the consensus. As a result, they may feel rejected or threatened by the consensus. This is because innovation creates insecurity within the consensus, as the source of that which produces the experience of security is progressively challenged. These people have a need to challenge society's values, and even their lifestyle may be considered too radical, as they challenge beliefs, customs, and taboos. The fifth house Pluto can experience this as well, I would say, and vice versa. The 11th house, stepping into the fifth house polarity. It says here, the polarity point, the intent is that they learn to take charge of their own destinies. That's what the fifth house Leo or fifth house Pluto is doing. They tend to think up future possibilities and then not act on them. This is a reflex reaction to the need to break free from the past. In this life, they're learning to put their ideas into action. This person I'm thinking of, he has a lot of ideas. He's 11th house Pluto. He's got a lot of ideas. As I said, he's creative. He's an artist. Lots of creative ideas around art, but never puts them. Rarely, it took him forever to actually put them out there. And then even when he does, like, this guy is so good at art, he could have his own business, but he's dabbled in business. Like, he just maintains his 9-to-5 job and then does his stuff on the side. But by now, he could definitely have something. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I mean, there's a lot here about Pluto in the Aquarius or 11th house if you're interested. I don't know that I'll read it all. Some of these people will synthesize the traditions of more than one culture, applying them in a new way in relation to the existing society. In extreme cases, they may drop out of society altogether. There's a guy that I did a couple videos on. His name is it's called Nate. They call him Nature Boy. He's a Legio Bishop, and he did this. He's got 11th house Pluto, and this guy took it to the extreme. It says here, some of these people synthesize the traditions of more than one culture, applying them in a new way in relation to the existing society. As part of what he was trying to do, I mean, people really misunderstood it because they're like, this is different, this is radical, this is innovative. They don't even use those terms. They use worse terms like you're damaging our society, your influence is hurting our children. That's the way they would look at it. And in the end, now he's in jail. So I believe, from what I could see, he's kicked out of Costa Rica, maybe kicked out of another country, and he's still in jail in the United States for, I'm not sure that he did anything wrong. But this is not just him. This happens all the time. If it's too extreme, if it's too radical against the culture, the 11th house Aquarius is going to have to keep their mouth shut. And that's not stepping into the Pluto polarity point in the fifth. And some people, as I hear, the intent is they learn to take charge of their own destinies. Some people get away with it, or they are able to take charge of their own destiny because they're, as I was speaking about my friend who's an artist, he could easily do something along the lines of what he's into. That's innovative. It's no one's going to complain. I guess as long as he doesn't take it too far, too radical as far as trying to influence society, and more or less keeping it to yourself. But the other guy tried to really, if you're the 11th house Pluto and you're trying to change society, it's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to fail, and not going to really. Your chart would show that you wouldn't have any planets in the fifth house polarity point for sure, because it's just not going to work. Well, it's not in one lifetime. We're talking about people. I love how people just jump in. Like, why even, unless they're just like scrolling over the video? I mean, they jump in and then they jump out like immediately. Like, why even click on the video if you're just gonna jump right out? I don't get it. Like I said, unless their mouse is going, their cursor's going over it, and that's counting as somebody entering the room. So let's continue here. In the extreme cases, they may drop out of society altogether. They feel they have no meaningful role to play, or that the society will not allow them to integrate their vision into it. They can become antisocial. Some will work to bring down the system they feel alienated from. And this is where I think you see all these people go, they want to go off grid. And you see anyone that is successful in going off grid, they probably have an 11th house Pluto, or they have a lot of Aquarius planets in the 11th house. And when you're watching them, it's interesting because if you're like me and you have this tendency and you have a lot of Aquarius in 11th house, even if you don't have that Pluto in the 11th, you start thinking that could be you. You want to do that as well. Or that society is changing and people are going to start going off grid and build tiny houses. But the reality is that's probably unlikely because these people are radical. They usually have 11th house Pluto. Other people don't have 11th house Pluto. So if they have no meaningful role to play, or that society will not allow them to integrate their vision into it, they can become antisocial. I have actually done this. And it is annoying, and I have become antisocial. And you probably see a lot of criminals. I'm not saying I'm a criminal, but There's probably a lot of criminals that feel this way, like not serious criminals, where it eventually leads to that rebelliousness to that degree, where they're just so mad. It's probably why I don't know that many 11th house Plutos. There's a need to learn objectivity and detachment. This can occur through intense crisis like experiences. These people tend to be quite rigid in their thinking. Yeah, so if you see like an 11th house Pluto, for sure, like this is with all of these, a lot of times when you look at the chart, you see like, okay, 11th house Pluto, there's probably going to be some fixed energy in the chart. Like the guy I was talking about that I did a video on, he had a Taurus sun and a Leo and a Leo moon. So yeah, I think he had a Scorpio rising too. So you see that lots of fixed energy that kind of goes along with that 11th house Pluto. And the nature of their ideas may cause confrontational encounters with people who are closer to the consensus perspective. The confrontations will cause the person to examine their ideas to see if they have become too fixed or attached to them. If this is the case and the ideas are limiting growth, the person will eventually make the necessary adjustments. This is interesting as like a maturity. You can see it as a maturity thing as well. You see people that have this 11th house Pluto where they rebel, they maybe get slapped on the wrist. I know another guy who has a stellium in Aquarius, and I don't have his birth time, so I don't know if he's 11th house Pluto, but he came into life and he had a judge tell him when he was young for dealing drugs that he grew up in New York City area. That, one more time, that's it. You're going to jail for a long time. That was enough to scare him out of that, turn his life around. Uh, and as it says here, that's that confrontation with the judge, someone from the consensus. He's basically running his own business, running his own show, dealing in drugs that technically, are there's nothing wrong with them, but the consensus says that they are illegal. He ran into that confrontation and he examined his life. That saw that he was limiting his growth, turned his life around, and started to work with the consensus and what he was doing to be successful. Essentially, he's doing the same thing at the consensus. He's a salesperson. He wasn't no longer selling drugs, but now he's selling. In his case, he's selling information technology because, of course, IT goes with Aquarius. These people can often be isolated, so that as well leads to the objective awareness. We we also experience our uniqueness through comparing and contrasting ourselves with others, and through bonding with like-minded individuals. So these people, they can be social in their own way. For that reason, if they are looking to figure out who they are, what their uniqueness is, Aquarius, so that they can step into that fifth house. Some 11th house people fear change and fear being different. See, a lot of people with, like, you could say with 11th house Pluto, and this is the thing with if you're studying evolutionary astrology, uh, people with 11th house, to say person with 11th house Pluto, and maybe the chart looks like something else, and there's not really anything in the fifth house, they may want to stay in the 11th house, and you might have that with the people that are forming like-minded groups, going off grid, subcultures, etc. They don't want to do a lot of this stuff that he's written here. They want to stay in their groups. And because I think when you're learning evolutionary astrology, a lot of it um, talks a lot about the past being Pluto, so where you're coming from, Pluto in the 11th, and then the south node of the moon, also where you're coming from, and then the polarity point of Pluto and the north node where you're headed. And it makes it seem as if that's bad. The past is bad. Pluto in the 11th is bad. The fifth house is good. The south node is bad. Is the north node is good. But when you look at a lot of charts, you see that, if you will talk to some people who have 11th house Pluto, and if you start talking like that, where they about, oh, you need to be in the fifth house, you need to be in your north node, etc., they'll look at you cross-eyed because that's not what they want, and that's maybe not what their life path is meant to be in this life, at least not for, we could say, up until their first Saturn return, or and then in many cases up to the second Saturn return and the third Saturn return. So that's something I think if you're studying evolutionary astrology, if you're into that and what I'm talking about here, it can be a little misleading. So basically, to sum that up, I don't think that the intention always is to be in the polarity point and the north node of the moon. All 11th house Pluto people have a need to link their individual purpose to a group or socialized purpose. These people can be natural leaders. Many instinctively understand group dynamics because they're innovative by nature. They can be visionaries who work towards social progress. And this is a problem with all Aquarius, 11th house, because they want to be social. Deep down, they want to link their individuality to the group. And that's difficult to do when you're dealing with the consensus, depending on how radical you are. Think of astrology. If you have it could be anything. It could be Aquarius, 11th house, um, aspects to Uranus. If you're really, really expressing that, and if you're into astrology, you may want to talk about astrology. And even though I think sometimes being an astrologer, it seems like you can talk about astrology and other people aren't really telling you the truth. Because the reality is, you can only really talk about astrology so much. So that's just an example. Like you can't. Uh, it's very rare to talk about astrology for me in real life and have them say, "Oh, I want a reading," and you don't even know if they're mocking you. They could be mocking you. A lot of people they don't they these Libra types, these types that are good with relationships. They never really they're not going to offend you. But yeah, this idea of linking your uniqueness to the group, because most people are followers. They must learn to take the initiative and not wait for everyone else to be acting before they act. Those who have been rejected by the consensus society must learn to develop their own purpose and link it to a socially useful need. They will not evolve through standing outside of society, being eternal social critics. They must learn that their power is, in fact, that they are different and that it is okay to be different. In fact, it's even necessary. See, I think it's okay. It's okay to be different. You just have to walk that line carefully. Understand, like as an 11th house Pluto or an Aquarius person, etc., just understand that you're not going to change the consensus. And as long as you don't try to change the consensus, they'll usually, at least where I'm at, the United States, 2024, where we're at right now, they will, for the most part, will respect your uniqueness. As long as you're contributing and you're not trying to change the consensus ideas completely. Like they'll respect that it's your idea. as long as you don't project it onto them. They need to become detached from their cherished ideals when those ideals are not appropriate to what they are currently dealing with. That's an important line right there that I think a lot of people will go through these ideals because idealism comes from can come from Aquarius. It's like if you're giving someone an astrology reading and they're having an issue, a practical issue with their everyday life, and you're really talking about, um, well, I mean, it could even be religion. You're talking about spiritual things and let go and prayer and things like meditation and things like that, and they're trying to solve a problem that needs some serious attention. These people can all experience shocks through friendships. Having the rug pulled out from under them enforces the need to take charge of their own lives. Generally, these people will have only have a few close friends at any one time in life. That shit's annoying right there. Shocks through friendships. I have had many, many, many shocks when it comes to friendships. I have Jupiter and Uranus in the 11th house. I've had great friends. I believe, I guess it's the Uranus there. I've had lots of good friends, and they eventually will shock you through a move or not talking to you anymore. And that shit's tough when you value friendship. Trauma. Trauma as a dynamic in astrology correlates to Uranus, the 11th house, and Aquarius. So Pluto in the 11th can correlate with trauma. Talking about Pluto in the 11th from the EA glossary. See if I can find anything else here. Projections. Aquarius is the archetype that correlates with projections from our own unconscious. These projections can be based on past traumas, i.e., this reminds me of my ex partner, my old friend, parents, etc., which are then cast onto the person who you are involved with now. It's funny, I was watching one of those dating shows on YouTube, and the guy comes in and he has a choice between there was like ten women, and the one woman said, "You remind me of my sister or my brother, so therefore you're out. I can't date you." And he's like, "You're projecting." And that's what he's talking about here. Projecting your past trauma onto people. Man, astrology can really help so many people. It's and you can see, like, I'm doing this. If you're watching this later on, someone popped in and gave me a like. I appreciate that. But everyone else was like in and out in 5 seconds, and you never know how you really don't know why. If it's just like the content, if it's again like they're just scrolling through. But to get anything out of this, you gotta put some time in it, like anything. 2 to 4 years, 3 to 4 years. It's worth it. But people don't need it. To be honest, a lot of people don't need it until they do, and then it's too late. Too late. The separation has been done. Astrologically speaking, expectations are linked with the archetype of Libra, Libra correlates with the nature of our expectations within relationships and our ability or inability to reach a balanced state of giving and receiving within relationships. I have Pluto at 29 degrees Libra in the ninth house. Squaring my sun. Even though I don't think I have relationship problems, somehow I do, even though I don't think I should. When ultimate meaning is projected externally within a relationship, it is all too easy to fall into fantasies and delusions about the other person, regardless of how much actual contact there has been. Okay, so now he's getting more into other signs, other houses. So I think I'm going to leave that there for now. But that is Pluto in the 11th house. Welcome if you just jumped in. If you want to jump in the chat, I'm getting ready. Close this out unless you have any questions about Pluto in the houses or anything else. Some keywords here for the 11th house. He has liberation, my favorite. Liberation from conditioning. That's my absolute favorite. Individuality, also a big favorite of mine. Individuation. Secret societies. I like that one too. Anarchist, community, unique, projection, shocking, hyperactivity, telepathic, rebellion, like-minded groups, hopes and ideals. Hopes and ideals, that one's got me too. So next time, maybe I'll do Pluto in the second. We'll see. We'll see. Thanks for watching if you're watching, and have a great night.